Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America, website thisweekinamerica.us. With us on the program today, Dr. LeslieBeth Wish, a nationally recognized licensed clinical psychotherapist, honored for her pioneering work in love, career, happiness, and success. In fact, the National Association of Social Workers has named her on their list of the 50 who've contributed to the profession. Her research-based books are Smart Relationships and The Love Adventures of Almost Smart Cookie. And her website is very simple to remember, lovevictory.com. And she's back with us on the program. Dr. Wish, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, and happy holidays to you and all of our listeners.
Thank you. Same to you. And there are so many things to talk about. And the topic today is going to be interesting. It is, what's your relationship deal breaker? And this is something I know you've worked with the clients with, the patients with for a number of years, read a number of articles, done extensive research yourself. Let's talk about that. How do you know what's a smart relationship deal breaker and what's just sort of a picky one that's really not going to have a whole lot of consequences?
Well, the idea for this topic came from an article on November 3rd, I believe, in the Wall Street Journal, and it was about the research on relationship deal breakers. And I looked at their top list, so I will go through that now, but then I'll supplement it with what I learned from the thousands of women I did for the research for my books. And there is some overlap, but surprisingly not as much as I thought. So the number one deal breaker on these studies were done at various universities, University of Texas, University of Buffalo, let me see what else, Indiana University, University of Florida. So this article kind of put all these studies together.
It's a pretty good cross-section too, isn't it? It's a good scientific sample, I would think.
But some of these studies, you have to be very careful when you're learning about research. You have to know, how was it done? Whom did they ask? 18-year-olds? Who's the person who responded? And so some of these studies were done with preset answers. So that makes a really big difference. So this is the number one deal breaker of both men and women. And this surprised me. What they didn't like was someone who was disheveled in their appearance. So I have a friendly little sloth here, the word sloth from one of the 7 deadly sins. All right. And this is a very slow moving animal, and it kind of hugs the tree and takes its time to move an inch. And they are such messy little animals that if you get close enough to a sloth and feel its fur, it's got bugs and butterflies trapped in it. So disheveled and not, well kempt. So what does that mean? Let's break that down. That means that often a person doesn't care about themselves, doesn't have self-respect, self-esteem, and that's a big tell. Or on the other side of the same coin, they're defiant. I can come any way I want, so I slept in my clothes. This is take me the way I am. And both of those could be big deal breakers.
It's interesting. When I saw that, it's like, wow, that's sort of hard to believe. Now that you're describing exactly, you don't want somebody that you're seeing show up with bugs in their clothing, for example. So I can understand disheveled. But did that surprise you? Did that answer surprise you?
Number one, it did. I mean, I wouldn't want someone who is chronically defiant or chronically exhibiting their sense of low self-worth, but I don't know what my number one would be, but it certainly wasn't on the list from my research. What they didn't like, what the thousands of women I researched didn't like in my research, was they didn't like liars. They don't want to be cheated on. They don't want to have their finances taken. They don't want to be robbed, secret, access to your bank account. They don't want to know that their boyfriend or husband is in the basement sneaking at 2 o'clock in the morning looking at porn sites and contacting available people. So lying, and that has to do with trust. So trusting their partner was really number one.
Let's talk about the lying aspect. How long does it take to determine if someone you're in a relationship is lying? And how do you sort of have to I don't want to say set a trap necessarily, but watch for that? Because if the antenna's not up, you may not even pick it up.
Well, let me tell you what some of the women did in my study after they've been burned in love, many times. They went out to a restaurant with their new date and actually took the silverware or the glass in the restaurant. Don't tell anyone I'm passing this on. But I mean, I don't know the names of the restaurant, but they took something that had their fingerprints on it and they hired detectives to learn about the person because it isn't all on Facebook. Now, that's pretty extreme. I might do that, if God forbid, if I'm single again. But that is one of the ways that women followed up on their hunches. But to answer your question, can you really tell if someone's lying? You know, good liars are good liars. And you've heard on Dateline and 48 Hours all the stories about, the couple where the guy is so nice on the outside, the pillar of the community, and then he murders his wife. And everyone is so shocked they cannot believe that good old Joe did this. So it is so easy to be fooled.
At what point does a natural concern about this person, especially when it ranks number 2 on the list, if in fact they are lying, when does that cross over from a natural concern, a rational concern, to being irrational and maybe standing in the way of some relationships because you say or do something or sneak on someone you're dating to the point where they want nothing to do with the relationship and they weren't guilty of lying in the first place?
Well, let's look at some of the possible tells, okay? I can't list every single one that my clients talked about, but these were the top ones, and these are common sense. Does your partner call you at the last minute and say, "Oh, I'm at the office and I can't meet you for dinner," and that happens a lot? Or if they call you and say, "It's a last minute office party, and you don't mind if I come home a little late, do you, sweetheart?" And once or twice you want to be a good sport, no, have a good time, but you're looking for repeated excuses not to be together, particularly at your home time. You also want to look for sudden changes in your spending, where maybe your partner is spending a lot of money on their new love, and suddenly the things that you and your partner talked about buying have now been put on the wait list. So you want to look for that. You also want to look for sudden changes in your partner's appearance. Are they suddenly taking better care of themselves? Are they combing their hair differently, wearing different clothes, making sure their shirts are pressed or their blouses pressed? That's what you want to look for. Are they suddenly feeling moody or distant from you? Those are big tells. You're looking for changes.
So awareness is really a key, not necessarily conducting a full-scale investigation, but again, just keeping your eyes open and being aware.
Yes, absolutely. And that also goes back to, well, it's one of my favorite topics is intuition. Trust that gut feeling or however you get your messages. My intuition is really strong, but I don't get it in my gut. I get it as a message in my head, some voice saying, "Uh-oh, watch out for this." So you have to learn to know how to identify the way you get your intuitive messages, but whatever your instincts tell you and however they come to you, pay attention. When your antenna is up, listen to it.
Dr. LeslieBeth Wish, our guest on This Week in America, author. I mentioned her credentials, impeccable credentials at the beginning of the program. The website is very simple, lovevictory.com. We're just chatting away here. Dr. Wither's been with us so many times, I keep forgetting to tell people who she is. Maybe you'll recognize her from the voice because she's been on a number of programs and will continue to do so. If you go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, you can go to YouTube and pull up YouTube presentations, our video of our programs. You can also go to iTunes and pull up the programs when Dr. Wish is with us on the program. And intuition is something we spend a lot of time talking about. And again, I'm glad that you brought that up because so many times when I make a mistake, it's like I should have gone with my first inclination, my gut or my intuition. And remarkably, and you've studied this extensively, generally that first impression that we have is pretty much right on the money.
I can't agree with that because sometimes your first impression is based on your emotional default drives, is what I call it, your fallback position that often leads you down the wrong road. For example, I I had a client and a participant in my research who always looked for guys who needed to be rescued. She was Mama Bear. And every time she thought it was the right guy, she had that feeling of comfort, like, this is the one. I feel so good with this person. But all she kept doing was repeating over and over the same choice of guy, the same, I shouldn't say it that way, the same choice of relationship structure, where she ended up being in charge and she found someone who really didn't pull his own weight, but it felt good to her. So what you have to look at is, does my intuition that makes me feel good, is it also right? So you have to ask yourself that.
And I guess when you go down the wrong path so many times with your first impression, you realize maybe I should wait for my second impression before I make a determination. Dr. LeslieBeth Wish, our guest on the program. We're talking about deal breakers in a relationship. Got often talking about intuition. I want to come back. The time is going by so quickly in the program. Some of the other deal breakers that were in the survey. Yes. And how they differ from men and women. I think what you've mentioned so far pretty much are cross-gender, but is there a difference between men and women in terms of deal breakers?
Well, let's go through just a couple of the ones that men and women agreed on, and there is one divergence, and I think it's really interesting, and it tells a lot. So here is the second one in the list that men and women said they didn't like. They didn't like someone who was lazy. This is a little turtle. You know, turtles are very cute little animals, and I live in Florida, and we do lots of things to save the turtles. But remember, turtles are very slow, along with sloths. I didn't remove the sloth.
Yes.
So being disheveled and slow, they didn't like lazy people. They didn't want a partner who didn't pull his or her own weight. And again, we're talking about reliability, that you can leave the house and trust that your partner isn't going to leave the water running, the door open, the car without any gas in it, that you can trust your partner to make good decisions, to handle whatever work person is in the house, that they can, be a good problem solver. Because what you want, and that's what I'm getting from the analysis that I put on these findings, you want your partner ideally to be your wingman or your wingwoman, someone you can look to and say, on either side, they're my team. I can trust them. So disheveled, lazy, but here's the third one that both men and women said they didn't like. Neediness. And this is my little friend, the little octopus, because you know what happens when someone's needy? You feel that all the tentacles of the octopus are around your neck. You feel drained. You feel like, oh my God, when is it my turn to express what I need? And this is an interesting finding to me, because I found in my own research that men and women often fall into two similar traps in their relationship structures. It's not uncommon for men to choose women whom they can take care of and rescue. And so sometimes that rescuing gets to be too big of a job and ends up feeling once again like that octopus where their needs are just strangling you. And women, again, one of their second most common relationship patterns was to get in a relationship where they had to pull all the weight because they felt comfortable at first being in charge. But, carrying the weight of the world, like, that statue of Atlas carrying the globe on his shoulders, it gets really tiring. And one of the exercises I do in classes, and maybe your listeners and viewers can think about this, put your hands up in the air above your shoulders and hold them for a minute. It gets really tiring. And that's what it begins to feel like in some of these relationships.
It's interesting in the surveys, it was pointed out that people spend more time on deal breakers than deal makers.
Right.
What's your observation on that? Does that make sense to you, or are we spending maybe a little bit too much on the negative, not that much on the positive?
I think you need to look for both things. I think you really need to look for those tells, and that's why I like making dates be undates. Skip the fancy restaurant and all those, exciting things like the tickets to the, hottest rock show in town or something. Make your dates resemble real life. Run some errands together. Meet at the local coffee or sandwich shop. Meet his friends, her friends. Hang out because you want to see what the person is like in real life. Because no matter who you're married to or coupled with, life has a lot of just ordinariness to it. And couples who are in love say, you know what? Our relationship transforms the ordinary, and every day is just fun to be with my partner, or at least almost every day.
A couple minutes left in the program. If I'm looking at the results correctly, and I may not be, you're the professional, so you can tell me if I am or not. I'm looking at no sense of humor is there, lives far away is there, both about 50% on both sides. Bad sex bothers the women more than the men. It's like 50% for the women, 44% for the men. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, and let me explain two things that you said. Why is a sense of humor so important? Boy, is that ever important. Because a good sense of humor that you share with your partner tells you that you often have shared values, shared worldviews, and also, most importantly, you can laugh at yourself. If you can't laugh at yourself, if your partner doesn't have a sense of irony about him or herself, then chances are you're with a partner who always has to be right, will get angry at you for making mistakes, and this will be a partner who can't go with the flow. So that's why I love looking at dates that are kind of ordinary. But now let's go to the sex thing. This is so interesting to me. Men complain that not enough sex or a low sex drive in their partner was really, really something that concerned them. And that makes sense. Men in general, not all men, but men in general, their testosterone, kicks in. And I read a study somewhere, or many studies, that said how many times a day men think about sex. And it's like, wow, is it a lot? So they have a higher sex drive. Not always, but the testosterone kind of ramps it up. Women, on the other hand, didn't like bad sex. And that usually means, what is it, slam bam, thank you, ma'am?
Yes,
or,
yeah.
Or no tenderness, or, no attention to you. And that
I've got to go, my
important.
car is still running. So that would be in the bad sex category. Turn your car off before you go in to see the one you're romantically linked with.
Yes, and so that was important because bad sex made a woman not feel special or wanted or paid attention to or considered or to have her needs respected. And that's why that difference is so fascinating to me, that it's not the frequency for women, it's the quality.
Unfortunately, out of time. We will continue this discussion at a later date. Back with us on the program once again is Dr. LeslieBeth Wish. Her website is Love Victory. Her love site is lovevictory.com is the website. We're talking about Dealbreakers, Dealmakers in a relationship. You can find all the information at the website. A lot of great information there. Information on her books as well. Dr. Wish, it is always a pleasure. Interesting program went by way too quickly. Look forward to having you back with us. Thank you for being with us once again.
Thank you so much, and happy holidays to everyone.
Thank you. You're listening to This Week in America, website thisweekinamerica.us. Our guest on the program, Dr. LeslieBeth Wish, and her website is lovevictory.com.